We'll have 3 speakers in this session. Our first speaker is Bialaszewski. He has been involved for many years in the International Academy for Information Management. He received his PhD from State University System of New York at Buffalo. He has been instrumental in developing the MIS major at ISU, been concerned with management information for systems for many years. And he'll be presenting a talk today entitled Information Systems for the Future, a Global Perspective.
Thank you. I should give you time to buy rotten tomatoes or something. I felt I'm in a third world country the way I have had such poor luck connecting to the internet in some of the classrooms. So although I have several slides and links I would like to get to, I have decided to save myself frustration and just speak. I hope no one doesn't mind. That's how things used to be several years ago anyway. And when I say information systems for the future, I'm not talking about the talk Professor Dornberger gave yesterday. He had a great talk about where we are, where we're going. It was in this room, and if you missed it, you missed a very good talk. I'm going to relate this more than to education and where I think we should be going. And I can't do it without giving you some history. I have been in education a very long time. My background is about 90 credit hours of math and stat and pre-information systems and pre-computers. So I grew up with that. And so I started out in SUNY Fredonia, the state, as I was working on my doctorate, and teaching stat courses, and I felt that the students couldn't really learn stat unless they had some real-world data. And so I used a computer in I published the first article in 76. In 74, what I did was use a computer, i.e. a card punch, 3 turnarounds a day, results every 8 hours, and but nonetheless integrated a computer into the classroom. After teaching in the SUNY system and knowing how to program in Fortran and use software, I was hired by the Business Statistics, and at that time it was called Data Processing Department from Mississippi State University. And there we had a computer lab, and in the computer lab we had 64K Commodore computers. I'm glad we did. Most of the course was programming in BASIC. That's what the information systems was at that time. And I would give problems like, here's a random number generator. This is how you play craps. 2, 3, 12 on a first roll, you lose. 7, you win. Any other number, keep rolling. Simulate 1,000 or 100,000 dice rolls, and what percent will you lose? I'm glad I did those type of problems because we've moved far from that. We've moved far from coding and far from programming, and some of it is good and some of it is not so good. Because I will talk about bits and bytes in class and storage, and I tell the students, hey, I use the 64K computer, so what do you think I did? More math type problems or more word processing? You'd be surprised how many said more word processing, although you don't have the storage to even do reasonable sorts with 64K. No understanding kind of storage these days. Back in those days, as I said, it was programming in BASIC, using WordPerfect, using Lotus 1-2-3. GUI came along, and then Microsoft, then all universities started advertising Microsoft, and Microsoft's made a bunch of money. Now, I have moved quite a bit from there because I have been on a mission, I feel, the last several years to introduce students to open source programming. I myself, personally, I probably haven't used an Office product in I don't know how long. When I taught the intro course, I used OpenOffice.org, moved to LibreOffice, moved to PortableApps.org, and now I do everything with Google Drive. which I wanted to show you a few examples, but with this internet connection, I'm not going to waste your time by fumbling around and trying to get an internet connection. I did have formal training in the information systems area, as the AACSB sponsored an institute to basically earn the equivalent of a master's in information systems. So one summer I spent the entire summer at the University of Minnesota taking courses, and then the next year at Indiana University taking courses in system design, tools, and all the rest. I am glad that I had those courses because I met an individual who most of you have probably heard of. His name is Gary Dixon. Gary Dixon was one of the founders, if not the founder, of ISIS, a very large conference. He was also the first editor of MIS Quarterly, a very well-known journal in the MIS profession. And the smartest thing he said that I retained was, if you don't know why you're teaching something in class, don't teach it. I took that as very straight wisdom. For example, being a statistician, when I would teach a stat course, unless the student had a calc background, when you look at regression and the slope and intercept, I tell them you take the first derivative and solve it for 0, and you've got the best solution. If they haven't had calc, they didn't understand it anyway, and I found absolutely no damn gain by calculating the B is this formula, which was an algebra concept. So it really changed how I teach courses. Just to legitimize myself, a half dozen or so years ago, I got a call from the College Board, Educational Testing Service, asking as if I would serve for a 3-year contract with them constructing the CLEP exam, the Test Out Exam in Information Systems. So I do know what should be in the Information Systems course, although I teach it in a very, very different way. After tenure at at Mississippi State, I moved, because of an ex-wife, to Indiana State University, where I became the first chair and constructed the information systems program there. As I wanted to develop a quality course, I put together a corporate advisory board. I had the vice president of telecommunications from State Farm Insurance, the head of all non-engineering recruiting from Caterpillar Corporation, a bunch of pretty heavy hitters, and asked them, how should I develop this course? Here's the course content. Where is our weakness of the major? Where is our weakness in the intro course? And it was basically unanimous on this 12-person board that the students did not understand project management techniques very well. They didn't have an understanding of total quality management, TQM, very well, and didn't know how to work together on teams, didn't understand the importance of deadlines. And so I revamped the entire course, where about 20% of the grading is on testing. I still do testing, but it's very much project-oriented, covering the concepts through projects. As I teach the course, I don't have anything in my course account for more than 10%, which means I spend a hell of a lot of time grading. I hate it, but I feel that's important. Working on projects is important, but there was a person from Oklahoma State who had a publication, and I can't remember his name right now, talking about the downfall of semester-long projects if you get stuck on a bad team. So I give 4 short projects during the course. And the first week in any course I teach, no matter how technical, I talk about project management techniques and TQM. When I put students on projects, they must set deadlines, and I would hope that more of our courses go, that more of our courses go in that direction. And I have strict rules for firing group members. Deadlines are set. And it's very easy for me to see if deadlines are met by group members. In order to fire, a student would have to put a petition into me, or the whole group would have to put a petition, typically 3-person groups. And it's easy using Google Drive because it shows you the revision history. and they're in different colors when anybody entered, and if there was a deadline, somebody says, no, I was working on it, I can see the first time they entered. I mean, I can go back to any spot in the revision. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Google Drive, but it is a reason I'm not using the computer, because I don't have an internet connection right here. But given that I believe, I teach 3 sections of not the same course. What do you say? I teach 2 sections of a course typically for business administration majors, and 1 section for general education majors. And I try to give them a very global perspective on the material, and we take a look at all types of world issues related to information systems. And actually, I'm cross-listed now in the Department of Multicultural Studies because of looking at women's issues, penetration rates, what will certain countries be doing, what are the restrictions, etc. I share with you, and I shared this morning, that most students, and these are freshmen or sophomore students, do not know how to do a Google search. Do not know how. For example, I'll say, okay, let's do a search for Bialaszewski, and let's just look at my hometown's newspaper, Observer Today. Huh? You put both in? No. Bialaszewski, space, site, colon, observertoday.com. So most of them don't know that you can search just from one site and easily search just from one site. Given that this may be the only course they ever take, going with that in perspective for the general education majors, I've remodeled the course to give them what I think that they would need that maybe they haven't had, while not being a disservice to the traditional MIS topics. When we had the elections going on, I said, okay, let's look for Donald Trump, but only off of servers located in Poland. Huh? Yes, site, :PL, just put the country code in there. I had no idea. These are freshmen and sophomores. They've had probably an applications course in high school. They probably had computer programming. No knowledge on how to do an internet search. I would hope with the applications that we have that we actually teach them everything that would benefit them from those applications in the future. There's much free data available, very large databases that we should make use of for real-world data. One of them that I make use of, that I recommend to you, is GS, wish I could write it, .statcounter.com. That gives you market shares of operating systems by countries, by month, by day. For example, I'll give them a small project where I ask 3 in a group to discuss trends, picking out 3 countries, and each picking out 3 countries in each continent, picking out 3 continents, and each picking out 3 countries in each of the continent, and let's say limit it to mobile phones and operating systems, and let's take a look at the percentage of market change over the year, and what do you expect the future. Give me your thoughts on Apple that's having iOS now. They're planning a marketing program in India. In India, there's only 26% internet penetration in India. Currently, with mobile phones, there's 77.8% using Androids. There's 2.4% using iOS, and a 26% market share. Give me your own thoughts. Do a little bit of analysis on this, and do you think Apple's program is going to be a success or a failure, and why or why not? So they have to think about that. Again, yes, I do teach operating systems. I teach data storage and all the rest. But there is licensing, and actually I learned by this quite by accident, called Creative Commons licensing. I don't know if you're familiar with Creative Commons licensing. That says, I own the data set, I'll let you use it to do research, you can't make a penny off the research. So what I did was I was writing a textbook, and I took some of those sites and I did some research and wrote some conjectures, and the textbook company said, That was Creative Commons licensing. You can give these in your text as examples to the students, but you can't make a penny off of anything that uses Creative Commons licensing, which probably was good information for me, because then I used several more examples and exercises and projects in the text. But that's the usage of Creative Commons licensing. I would hope in our courses in the future we use a lot more of those free data sets. It gives the students more of a feel for what's really going in. I mean, half my class thinks iOS is the only operating system for cell phones in the world. And then they learn that 2% in India use it, of those with some type of access. What's going on there? In terms of the projects, as I said, they will have to petition me to fire a group member. Group members do get fired. They hate to fire somebody, but they know their grade suffers if they don't. Since on anything you do, whether it's constructing a website, doing a survey with Google Drive, just writing a document with Google Drive, the revision history gives all the dates of when people enter, and you can go back to any revision, certainly. But there's never an argument about did you work on it, when did you start it. I know when you started it. As I said, we talk about project management techniques at the beginning of the class, and the project management techniques, one is certainly to plan for unforeseen events. And that's to budget in not just extra time, but budgeted extra money. So that's covered in the first week of the semester. And I strongly, well, if a student says the printer didn't work, I said go back to the material in chapter 1 in the first chapter, because you should have learned about project management to set deadlines and budget in extra time, and that takes care of that problem, and I don't have to deal with it. A student would petition me to fire a group member. I make the decision based on the evidence, and usually they don't petition it. In the course, again, I have a tremendous flavor for open source software, and I probably spend more time than you do on things like the OLPC movement with Nicholas Negroponte, when he had his experiment in Vietnam, Cambodia, using open source and a spinning wheel to recharge computers and internet access. Where are we going with education? I'm on a mission, again, with open source all the way through. Are you aware of Plan Cibal in Uruguay? I don't know if you are. Uruguay is 79th in GDP, gross domestic product. It is the only country today that gives every student in first grade through 9th grade a free computer. So I can ask students, do you think much proprietary software is on that? They ran this program, but again, every student from first grade through 9th grade gets a computer at a cost of $100 per student per year, a cost of $400 of their educational budget. That's a trivial amount of money in education. When they set up this program, they left out the Department of Education, actually, in Uruguay. But everything is done with open source software. You know, here's a problem now in understanding. You have to teach a little bit about ASCII code still and about source code. If they don't know source code, what the hell's open source? They don't know what source is to begin with. So a drop of programming has to be introduced to give at least some understanding of where we're moving, if it's moving towards open source. There are people like the leaders in Uruguay who take education to be a right and not a privilege. I think we're still viewing it for the most part as a privilege, and if you can afford the better computer and if you can afford the better software, you can be more educated than someone else. I'm not sure that's the right approach, and I would argue it is not the correct approach. So I try to give the students a picture that there's more than the United States going on, and we must teach them how to research the importance of technology and to really get a global perspective of what's going on. If they don't understand a little bit about coding and a parity bit, somebody at McDonald's will still tell them, oh, the damn computer made the mistake, as opposed to running a check bit program once you press the key before the first thing is ever in any storage. They have a hard time understanding file sharing, that they don't have a copy of the file unless they make a copy of the file. Another thing I like with using Google Drive is I teach 3 courses, and they have different assignments, but I try to structure things due at the same date. So I share a file called critical dates, and if I have to change a date, I make one change and all 3 classes have the change. I don't have to update something else on Blackboard. I don't have to worry about more redundancy. I try to minimize the redundancy. So we talk about shared resources. Now, the students are wondering then, well, this is a monopoly by Google with Google Drive. What if they decide to charge a horrendous amount of money one day and I no longer can use it? Well, this is a fact. It's not this year's fact. It's about a 2 to 3 year old fact. Of all the advertising dollars on the internet, Google got 43% of all advertising dollars. To put that in perspective, AOL plus Yahoo plus Microsoft all added up to 14% of all advertising dollars. That's where they get their money. And they do some nice things. Again, to put that in perspective, Facebook got 3% of all advertising dollars at that time. Google doesn't make or need to make their money on the search engines. That's all. Okay, thanks. Okay. And then what about search engines in other countries or blockages? China, North Korea, Iran, Syria, North Korea, just a sampling of countries that block Google, which says block YouTube, because Google owns YouTube. All the advertising dollars through YouTube, that's also Google's dollars. So what if they want to make an investment? I have a few dollars invested in something called Tencent. Others will believe it's Baidu or Alibaba. Those 3 account for 60% of the internet advertising. Will Google crack that market? What about the politics of cracking the market in Google? What about cracking the politics in North Korea? What effect would that have to do with women's rights in some of these countries? Something to put in perspective for the students is the internet penetration rate current today in Afghanistan is 8.3%. Democratic Republic of the Congo, 2.4%. Madagascar, 4.2%. I just returned from a trip to Las Vegas, and many of the cab drivers were from Africa, and I'd ask them where they were from. One said Eritrea. I had never heard of the country. I did some research on the country. I see their internet penetration rate today is 1.1%. How will that affect the negligible? So what will the changes be? And will underdeveloped countries like Uruguay is classified, are they going to jump into proprietary stuff, or are they going to jump into open source stuff? So I'm on a mission on open source software for the students, because it is not worse. One of the sites I have them go to is netcraft.com. And I have them search the operating system used by several different servers. And they learned that, hey, it's not just google.com, it's google.pl and google.uk and google.au and google.ca. And every one of those damn servers in a large company like Google is running Linux, every one. Go to Amazon, everyone's running Linux and open source. Is Google or Amazon afraid of using open source software? Hell no. Would I rather go through Google Drive and use their antivirus software before anything gets there and anything comes back? Hell yes. You know, we talk about security, and then faculty members use their flash drives and leave them in their PCs at my university, and I wonder, where the hell's the security there? You know, and yet some administrators believe that that's more security than had you use Google Drive. Anyway, for me, the future in education is what I've been doing and changing, and that's trying to promote the use of open source software. Two other just trivial examples. We moved, and to me, project management is critically important, and the timing and deadlines are critically important. For 15 years, I raised and raced thoroughbred horses. And they draw in for the horse first race at noon. And you ain't there at noon. Sorry, they're not going to do a redraw. You lose. There are things in the real world that have strict deadlines, meet strict deadlines, and you better be used to making the deadline. The excuse, it may be a legitimate excuse, but it just may not cut a change in the system. Just a second, let me gather my my thoughts here. So anyway, course delivery in the future, I would promote project management to a large degree. I'm a subscriber to Deming and all of Deming's points completely. Actually, back home, I'm the president of the Wabash Valley ASQ, which encompasses a large part of Indiana and Illinois. And that stands for the American Society for Quality, which promotes statistics and an emphasis on quality of what you do. As I said, I was a subscriber to Deming. Deming is 100% against peer review, even though many college administrators are not. Which means when I put these groups together, I don't have any ranking or rating of players, of team members. I cut that out a long time ago when I know one student did all the work on a 4-project group, and the other 3 said, we did all the work, that guy did nothing. We get the grade. And I said, yeah, I knew that was not possible and didn't listen to him. It was that simple. They hate firing a group member, but the rules of strict deadlines, not taking excuses, promoting handing in projects ahead of time, learning how to work with others, communicating, learning that there will be conflicts and how to deal with conflicts. The advisory board says that the technology will change. They need the foundations in the technology, but understanding that is more important than studying the material. You may disagree. Again, I didn't make this up. I got this from corporate leaders, vice presidents of various corporations. And we set up much of our programs, much of our courses in the same way at Indiana State. So I'll take any questions. I don't know how much time we have. I hope you haven't hated me because I didn't have some PowerPoints up there. At the end. Oh yes, that's right, I forgot.